For my Pechacucha speech, I'm going to be speaking about logging. This is something that's had a huge impact on both sides of my family, and it has taught them hard work, and it has taught them the love for nature, but most importantly, it has taught them how to stay away from bears as they are waking up from hibernation. In the early 1700s, my dad's family first immigrated to the U.S. Logging was a huge industry then. Building up of homes and firewood, and the growth of all of the community was important then. One thing they used for logging were mules. The ones on the right-hand side they're a donkey, but they're bred with a draft horse, and as you can see, they're huge, they're massive. The nice thing about mules is they can go on less feed. The feed it can be kind of gross and moldy, and they're awesome. They keep going for days. The other thing they used when they were logging were oxen. They're steers that have been trained to pull logs and wagons, and the nice thing is, especially in the South where my dad's from, they could go through swamps, and they would be up to their chest in water going, and they could go all day. In the early 1920s, my great-grandfather passed away, and he left his wife and 8 kids to go through life on their own. His mother took in washing for the logging camp, and my grandfather, he was the water boy, so he took water around to all the loggers. This is an example of some of the primitive tools they used. The big crosscut saw, the axes, those types of things were, the basic type of things that they used to log during that era. And there's an example of the house with the log cabin with the chinking that was used from their logs they pulled out. After the logs were pulled out, they were taken to what was called a mill pond. And this is a place that actually washed the logs. It got all the grime and all the dirt off of it, so it wouldn't gum up the blades and they would last longer. This is an important part of logging was the industry of house building, and this is an example of a hotel that was built in Alabama, and you can tell it's kind of an early Victorian, but all of that logging was done and the lumber made right there locally from the Bollinger Logging Company. My other side of my family was from Mexico, and they were driven out by Pancho Villa in the early 1920s. He was a renegade that burned and pillaged, and my family came up to Arizona. They ended up settling near Thatcher, Arizona. This is a kind of a faraway picture of the Graham Mountains. And they had, on top of there, they had lots of trees, and they did lots of logging. They would bring down for all the local areas and ship it off to Mesa and Phoenix. But this is where my family kind of settled at that point. When they were driven out of Mexico by Pancho Villa, my great-grandmother was actually pregnant with my grandpa. And so she actually rode a donkey down out of the logging camp of the Grand Mountains down into Thatcher with her 2 little kids to have my grandpa. So my grandpa grew up in logging towns, and his dad grew up. He was already an adult at that point, but he had grown up as a logger as well. The picture in the right-hand corner is one of my grandpa's draft horses that he would use to pull the logs out of the woods and later up onto trucks. They owned, my grandpa and his brothers, they owned a portable log mill that they would take different places, and they could set up and take it down. This one is used for stacking the green logs. As you can see, it has a belt that would take it to the end, and then they had to let those green logs harden up. This is an example, as I mentioned before, of the crosscut saw, and it's been around forever. This is a picture they depicted probably 1500s, and it's great because you can use 2 men to pull and push and get a lot of cutting done rather than with just one person. Back in the 1950s, though, after World War II, they created the mechanical chainsaw, which was huge for the industry. This one on display is actually a two-person chainsaw that enabled two people to hold it, which was awesome, but mostly now they just do a one-person chainsaw. So, part of the logging industry, my grandpa would always keep an eye out for a Christmas tree for my grandma during the year, a spruce tree. That was just something neat about my grandparents, that they were very patriotic. They loved this country, and they loved everything about it. That was the next point, is they love to vote. And this is a picture of my grandparents in the parade. They would always have horses, either draft horses or mini horses, but all the grandkids, it doesn't show a picture here, would ride on my grandpa's log truck, so the big old foot would be on there. And in fact, he was even buried, his casket was carried on a log truck. So growing up, I had a real love for the woods and love for nature, and not so much a love for spiders, because every time we would go out into the woods or go into the wood pile to collect the wood we need to burn, you guess what I found? It was always a spider. One of the biggest things with the logging company that my grandpa was part of, it was the Logging Association of Northern Arizona. And as I was getting ready to go to school, I was applying for scholarships, and I was really greatly appreciated the fact that I got a logging scholarship, which helped pay for school. So I've learned a lot being part of a family that is loggers. We learned the importance of harvesting the older trees so the younger ones can grow up, to help fire prevention, to help jobs, all those types of things. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be part of a logging family.